So today I have the pleasure to have Edi Schmid with us. Edi has an amazing experience in the insurance world. I understand that you've worked in the industry for over 20 years. Is that correct?
Thank you, Philip, for the nice welcome. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. It's a compliment that I don't look that old yet, but my experience in insurance is more than 30 years.
Well, so I guess in 30 years, you've seen a lot. That's why I wanted to pick your brains based on your experience or what you've seen in all these years. What do you think would happen in the next 5 years in the insurance industry? And I know it's a difficult exercise, but do you have any wild guess on the topic?
If I had to project 5 years into the future, my first comment would be that usually people overestimate the impact of change in the short term, but underestimate what is possible with new technologies in the long term. But only 5 years, I frankly don't see that much change. It's just continuous, gradual development. And I would also point out that people sometimes forget that insurance is a rather slow-moving system. A lot of the insurance is actually mandatory. The government mandates you to buy car insurance, health insurance, building insurance. It's interlinked with the social security system. A lot of regulation, which means the whole system in every country develops rather slowly. And also, I think what cannot be underestimated is the stickiness of the well-established agency broking system to distribute insurance. So I think these factors rather slow down the development. But I would still always advocate that the insurance industry needs to be innovating relentlessly, because I'm convinced there's so much that could be done much better along the insurance value chain by using technology, data. But I'm sure we get into this later. Yeah?
Exactly. If in the 5 years there wouldn't be a huge change, but you rather say that you would expect something way bigger in a longer term, like in 20 years, for example, could this be a substantial change in the industry?
Yeah, if I project 20 years, I would see a lot of change. Maybe still a few features from today will remain also in 20 years. But over that period, I think we will see quite some dramatic changes. But what I would first point out that I think the insurance industry has a lot of need to improve. It has been successful, but if you think across the value chain, it needs to be much more efficient. Products should be more affordable to people. There's huge protection gaps. Many people don't even buy insurance. So there's actually huge growth prospects that insurance can do much better. And it's an attractive proposition. You help people to deal with adversity. I think insurance should be at the forefront of sustainability of all these issues. And that's why it should become a much more attractive proposition, enabled by more and better technology and data. But I would still see quite a few of the currently successful players. I would still see most of them around also in 15, 20 years. But I also see there's room for new ventures to gain part of the market or to work together with established players. I think there will be quite a mix. Overall, I think there's a huge potential to do insurance much better consumer proposition, much more affordable, enabled by technology, but still paying attention to the human touch, because in the end, you support people in adverse situations. So the people side, I think, will always remain important.
You just mentioned there is a big difference, protection gap. Are there some special markets? Could you split the world in two parts, for example, or is there a way to identify different elements there?
Yeah, I mean, generally there's big protection gaps almost everywhere. Obviously, the gaps are bigger in emerging markets. If you go in some Asian markets, some African markets, there's a very low penetration. Very few people even consider buying or can afford to buy insurance. But even in very established markets, like in Europe, you have big gaps. Even in the US, when you think about mortality protection, there's a lot of families, if the breadwinner would die, there wouldn't be any money for remaining family. So these gaps are huge. They're quantified is more than $1 billion easily. If you just think about health insurance or mortality insurance or property catastrophe insurance, cover for flood and other things is huge. So it also means the insurance industry could be much bigger by finding ways to cover these gaps. I always say, if you're in insurance, who is your biggest competitor? It's actually the people not buying insurance. That's the biggest competition. Yeah? So we really need to do much better to increase the trust in the product. I think that's a key element to make it much easier to buy insurance, but also to make it more affordable by also taking out quite a few of the inefficiency along the value chain.
It's quite fascinating because what you say, increasing trust, I like it very much. And also basically the main competitor are the people who are not buying insurance. Well, that's incredible. That means this industry has a huge potential over the next years to come.
Yeah, clearly I see huge growth opportunities. I mean, the amount of risk in the world, in all the markets, is increasing. Yes, obviously with technology you can also mitigate some risks. If you think about the car industry, with more advanced driving systems, the frequency of car accidents will likely go down. But on the other hand, there will be new risks on the liability side, as climate change introducing more weather volatility. So I think in terms of just growth outlook, insurance is the place to be. Historically, it has clearly grown above the GDP. I think also a long time into the future, it will grow above GDP. If you add on top that you can make the proposition much better than it is today, I think it should be quite an attractive industry to be in. That's actually one of my hopes, that we can make it more attractive on the one hand for consumers, but also for talent, because it's a good product, it's a proposition to help people who are in adverse situation, to make them resilient. It should be at the forefront of sustainability. I think all these things are quite close to insurance. So I really hope it will become a much better proposition for consumers, but also for talents, because that in the end will make the difference to be successful, to have the best talents. Well-trained talents, I of course mentioned to you.
And that's very interesting, because when I speak around to the new generation, to the talents that you mentioned, I say, hey, what do you think about the insurance industry? It's rare that I get an input where they say, oh, wow, that's awesome. That's really where I want to work. Unless they've studied actuarial sciences, of course. But normally they are quite reluctant even to work in that industry. But it sounds from you that it really would be a very good choice.
Of course, I agree. Also, my personal experience, I rather stumbled by accident into the insurance world as a scientist in physics and as a physics teacher. But once I was in insurance, it started to become clear that this is an attractive proposition to help people in adverse situation, to deal with all these different risks, with catastrophes, with mortality. And data has always been a key element to understand which factors drive the risks. And that's even accelerating at a faster pace into the future. A great proposition to the consumer, plus a very attractive, intellectually challenging field. I think these are factors that should make insurance an attractive place to work. But still, on the consumer as well as on the talent side, insurance has not the best reputation. There's still a bit this lack of trust. There's this whatever agents trying to sell covers you don't need, and if there's a claim, the insurance company will make it difficult for you to get the money. So I think around this trust, this is critical for being successful, yes. And then, of course, support it with easier access, maybe more digital ways. You can sell it also online. But as I said earlier, I think the people side will always be there. As soon as it gets complicated, a bit more sophisticated coverages. And of course, you're talking about life-changing events for some people. If you think about your mortality, health issues, your house wiped away by catastrophes, I mean, these are not easy things. That's why it's also not so straightforward. Nobody goes on the internet and just looks for insurance. So often talking to an expert in the field helps to come up with the right solution. But clearly more digitally enabled is important, also to bring the efficiency into the system.
Now you're speaking about the more digital aspect, the efficiency. There are some companies coming into the space, like the famous insurtechs versus the established insurance companies. How do you see this operating together?
What I always like is combining the old established things with new things and make what is already there much better. Often there's a bit of competition. Established players try to defend the way they do things, and others try to conquer the market. I think dexterity is the term, to really best combine old ways with new ways. And insurtechs, I think, are just catalysts. Certain things are faster possible if they're done by a new startup company. In a well-established organization, there's some maybe cultural resistance to change quickly. There's a bit the issue of internal cannibalization. If your agents are very successful in their traditional ways, they will not easily then support a switch to a digital channel. So these factors, I think, benefit a bit startups to do things quicker. But I think in the end, there will be various combinations. I think also well-established players can be very successful. And I've seen very old established companies having within the organization very successful startups within their own organization. But of course, you can also cooperate with a startup. There have been many insurance startups, and some were quite successful in certain niches, but they came to a saturation quickly. or some found a nice complement to one element in the value chain. Yeah? But the real disruption, an end-to-end solution that gathers huge market share, millions of policies, has not happened. I think it's a bit a combination of various factors. As I said earlier, this interlinkedness with the social security system, the regulation, the data protection. I think there's various factors that maybe rather speak for well combining things an established player can bring, skills, maybe with some startups, maybe with another company that brings distribution, another one brings data. This partnering across different fields, and maybe not just thinking about insurance in isolation, but really thinking about insurance in combination with other services and products that are then even more compelling to the consumer at the end.
Are you speaking about something like an ecosystem, for example?
Yeah, it's a bit a buzzword, yeah, ecosystem, but I think just the idea that not necessarily one company can build everything and access the consumer. Mobility is the good example, yes. We have the car companies, the mobility system, and somehow you need to fit insurance. Historically, that's been quite separate, but you could easily imagine a very different world in maybe 10 or 15 years with different mobility patterns of people, the data in the car, the driving assistance systems, so we can come up with a much more refined insurance proposition, which as a consumer you hardly even notice. Yeah? It just becomes part of the product. And the term is embedded insurance. It's most established in the warranty field. If you buy whatever electronic equipment, you pay $5 more and then you have a warranty for whatever, 3 years, 5 years. This is a good way. If you buy a product, you should not think about insurance. The product should just come with the resilience features ready-made in the beginning.
So seamless insurance, basically embedded insurance, that's what you're mentioning. There's an important topic these days. Everybody speaks about the blockchain, cryptos, etc. How does that link maybe to embedded insurance and to insurance overall?
Blockchain or distributed ledger technology is the broader term. It's starting to play a role. There's some example of its application. Maybe I would even think of many different new technologies. They all have certain applications in insurance. If I think about blockchain more specifically, the big benefit is it builds trust when people are transacting with each other as a company. And as we said earlier, trust is an important element that maybe is not strong enough in insurance industry. So if with the help of a blockchain, this will actually can help increase this trust, I would see application. But I don't think blockchain is the silver bullet for everything in insurance weaknesses. For certain problems, there may be other technologies. And I think that the broader comment I would make often in insurance is not really the technology that is the bottleneck. It's more the people, the processes, the culture, how quickly consumers adapt to a new concept, how quickly are the insurers or the brokers willing to adjust. Even with the blockchain, the big challenge actually is not the technology, but is to standardize insurance contracts, so that you can really exchange. You need to agree certain protocols and standards, and often that's the bigger challenge.
It's mostly the process, as you said, that would be the challenge here. So it's not about only technology, you said, but there is another big topic, which is artificial intelligence that would make maybe the insurance really go forward or completely challenge it. Is that going to be something important in the industry or just an enhancement to it?
I think artificial intelligence will have a big impact, not just in insurance, but also in other fields. I think about artificial intelligence in a more pragmatic way. In the end, it's just smarter algorithms. I've studied a lot about behavioral economics and the strengths and weaknesses of the human brain and the human judgment. And in my mind, it's clear that for many tasks, also in insurance, in underwriting, in claims, a well-trained algorithm, an artificial intelligence, can do a better job than a human. But what, of course, is the key issue with artificial intelligence or algorithms is you need the good data to train it. And then you get into the field of how much data will insurers really have available and how much data will regulation and consumer sentiment permit even to use. I think there will be, and there are already quite some limitation that regulation or the consumer will not let insurers use all the data that could be used to come up with even smarter algorithms.
I guess that's where we see the split maybe between the life and health side of insurance and the property and casualty side, right? That's what you're aiming at.
I think that's a good way to think about it. Obviously, potential application of artificial intelligence, you could think in P&C and life and health, just more data about the health, the conditions, more data about catastrophe, about the weather, about the location. So there could be lots more you can do to be more risk specific, so to speak. But I think it's fair to say in life and health, there's even more hesitation or resistance to use all the data. For example, think in life and health, you can use smoker or non-smoker status. That's allowed as a factor in your underwriting. But most countries already prohibit the use of, for example, genetic information. So as an insurer, you cannot even ask people about their own knowledge about their genetic disposition to diseases. And it just shows there will be quite some limitations what data insurers actually can use to be more risk specific. And it goes back to an earlier comment. I mean, insurance is also part of the social security system. So becoming even more risk specific, trying to discriminate only the very best risks from the worst risks, you can only do to some extent. In the end, you need to come up with a system that works for the society, for the population at large.
So you mean that even if now, thanks to technology, through AI, we have the ability to discriminate, insurers will restrict themselves from doing this to a high level of granularity? Is that what you're mentioning?
To some extent, insurers themselves, but I think it's more what the consumer, the society, or the regulation in a specific country will allow the insurers to do. They will say, there's already examples, you can, in some countries, not differentiate whether somebody is a male or female. It's just not allowed by regulation or the example on genetic information. Each country will come up with regulation, what can be used and what not. But I still think despite these potential or likely limitations, data will be crucial. And also, from what I've seen, the most successful insurers are those that really are very disciplined with data, capture the data, clean them up, have them available, because only if your own house is in order, then you can start to partner, maybe with a startup, with another data company, with another distribution company to come up with an even better proposition. So you need to start with your own data and IT environment being top notch. Yes? Then you can start to benefit maybe from much more advanced technology, data combined with other players out there. That's a bit how I think the future. You need to be very good in what you do as an insurer, but then have the ability to interlink with other companies, with technology companies, with a data company, with a distribution company, with an ecosystem, as we earlier said. That will be crucial to be successful in the future.
So you need to be top-notch. That's one of the elements that take away from that. Top-notch, do things properly, have a good reputation too, and that way only can you have a good ecosystem.
I think reputation, brand, because still insurance, it is setting a promise. So people need to trust that when things are really getting bad, the insurer will be there helping them, not making life even more difficult. And still, there's room for improvement also in this dimension.
A bit earlier, you were mentioning that there were a lot of changes, artificial intelligence, and the evolution of the industry. And I would like to say, what's going to happen? Because now we'll have AI being able to take a lot of the underwriting process work, the claims. What's going to happen to the jobs? Are we going to see a lot of jobs being lost in the industry?
That's a question I've heard many times already years ago, not just in insurance. As I said earlier, some tasks in insurance can be done better by an algorithm than a human being. And I also commented earlier that the insurance industry has a huge need to become more efficient. Across the value chain, there's a lot of inefficiencies and making, in the end, the product more expensive than it needs to be. So replacing some jobs, back office jobs, just repetitive type of work, this is good for everybody at the end of the day. If you can eliminate some of these jobs, make insurance more affordable, then there will be new jobs that are even more interesting than the current ones. And then the underwriters or other people can focus more on the creative part, really come up with solutions and deal with the human aspects of insurance. So there may be some cost reduction, but it will be more, let's say, boring type of jobs. And then I think there will be new, even more interesting jobs in underwriting, but in other aspects of insurance as well.
So if I'm 20 years old or 24, just finished university, I got my good grades, I'm very motivated. What kind of job should I look for in the insurance industry?
If you're new entering the insurance industry, what is always good in the beginning is to get some exposure to different parts of the value chain. You should always look to have real consumer engagement. So what it really means to deal with a consumer, how to underwrite the concrete product, to deal with the claims. I think this is an important, very practical experience you need in this business. But insurance, again, as we discussed earlier, goes across many different disciplines. Then over time, gain some experience in some of them. That's what I felt attractive, to cover different parts of the value chain, not just in one area.
So explore the whole value chain. Well, that means also, if I have to explore the whole value chain as a newcomer to the industry, I also need to be trained. Is there any future for training in the insurance industry, or is it going to be so process-oriented and I'll have just a little bit?
I think there's huge need for training. The pace of change is increasing, so the need to stay abreast is just huge. So training at the start of a career, but then also ongoing training throughout your career is going to be crucial. There's also a talent gap that will emerge in the industry. A lot of baby boomers like myself getting close to retirement age, and not as many new people entering the workforce. So I think there will be a huge need for training in the fundamentals, but also, of course, then to stay on top of the fundamentals, basics. You need to be on top in terms of data, technology. There's a lot of data protections, there's compliance issues, there's so many things. You need to do well to run a very good insurance proposition. That training will only become more important.
You said a word, compliance. Well, from what I've seen in many cases, a lot of companies try mostly to protect themselves. So sometimes the training, and correct me if you disagree, seems to be more like a liability issue for the company that wants to make sure that they will not be sued if an employee does anything, rather than really training the employee. Am I misunderstanding something?
I would just say that there's a need for more offensive training and more defensive training. I also like the offensive one more, just to equip people with new skills so they can go out, develop business, develop new propositions, all of that. Yes, but it's clear, as we said earlier, insurance is a sensitive issue. There's this trust element, so you need to make sure that you run your business with a high ethical standard, you treat the consumer fairly, you comply with all the laws and regulation. And as this world of regulation and sanctions has become also quite complex, you just need a way to make sure that all your staff has an adequate level of training in these fields. That also means you need to force it, you need to control it. Also, you will not every day apply for a compliance training voluntarily. And so you need to have some mechanism to make sure the basics are covered. But in the end, the progressive one, to inspire people to learn new things, that's the more important one. Because if they really like what they do, if they want to give a good service to the consumer, they will also then make sure that what they do has a good compliance and is in line with a high ethical standard.
We are nearing the end of our very interesting discussion. You have a large experience in underwriting. What about the future of underwriting? Will it be done by machines at some point? Is it possible?
Referring to some of my earlier comments, there are clearly parts in underwriting, in claims, in other areas of insurance that can be done better by an algorithm. And also there's a need to make things more efficient. So I think some of these tasks, it's better for the industry if these are going to be replaced by automation, by algorithms. But I would see this as a positive, because then underwriters and other experts in the insurance field, they can deploy their talent, their innovative skills, their solution skills, their consumer orientation to more attractive types of tasks than just doing repetitive, boring type of work. This is in the end a positive, yes. And also I think insurance should also expand its remit again beyond just doing cover and then paying claims. Insurance should be more of a risk consultancy. That as an underwriter, you help your client to not just pay the claim if something happens, but really prepare better for the risk, to mitigate the risk before it happens. In health insurance, there's already lots of good examples that the health insurer helps the consumer live a healthier life, and then you get certain incentives if you exercise. There's all sorts of examples what you can do to make insurance a much broader proposition. Technology, automation, algorithms, I hope, will reduce quite a number of rather repetitive, not so interesting tasks. And then the talents can focus on these much more attractive solutions, client-oriented types of tasks. Plus, you should not forget, again, insurance is selling a promise. So the emotional aspect to sell it, but also to deal with people who have an adverse situation. is critically important. Then there's more room for people to deal with these kinds of issues. But leave the pure calculation or the pure repetitive task to a machine. To me, that's an attractive future and not a negative.
So machines would do the repetitive tasks that are maybe not as interesting and challenging, and people will focus more on the people skills, on the maybe more complex and more consultative work.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, we're nearing the end, and I would have a last question for you. We've heard a lot from the tech world of the famous metaverse, Facebook being renamed Meta and all these things. Is metaverse going to meet insurance at some point? And if yes, how could that look like?
Yeah, now you're really getting me onto thin ice. Huh? I don't even have a Facebook account, so maybe I'm the wrong.
It's not fashionable anymore.
But actually, if I thought to just use my fantasy, I can well imagine a lot of the younger generation to like to dive into something like a virtual reality, because people like games, people like scores, people, including myself, like to have a bit of competition. So if you can have all these ingredients in a metaverse environment, I think that's an attractive idea. Huh? I have seen already very exciting examples of virtual reality in, for example, the medical field for training medical doctors. And I think that could also apply to insurance. Yeah? If you have a very attractive virtual reality world where you can learn everything about insurance, I think that could be an attractive way to get exposed to all aspects of insurance, rather than some boring whatever classroom training, to dive into a metaverse where you can learn everything about insurance. This could be an attractive proposition. I think one where Engage is well positioned to play a role into the future.
Thank you. Well, it sounds really exciting, because this insurance industry that had some reservations. It sounds like everything which is exciting, all the new techs can be applied to this industry and can really bring it to a more human, a more people-oriented industry where machines do the boring part in a way, and humans can really do what they're best at, that is being humans. So, wow, very much inspiring. I'm looking forward to that future that you're describing.
Let's see how quickly the future arrives. I think you can already buy a house in the metaverse. So maybe we should open up the first insurance company in the meta world already.
Let's talk about that after the call. Well, thank you very much for your time, Edi, and all the best.
Talking to you, Philip. All the best. We'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye now.